Hey folks, this is Kalani. It's over. They finally did it. Our most beloved and overpowered corruption effect has finally been targeted with the Nerf bat. Oh, mass AoE pulls will never be the same again. Twilight Devastation is the next corruption effect on the chopping block, which isn't too surprising considering just how powerful it can be in a variety of content. The nerf is a little weird though, we'll dive into it in a second. There are also some other changes that I want to talk about, including changes to the horrific vision system, some raid tuning for the Nyalotha raid to make some bosses easier, and one boss maybe a little bit harder. Let's see what happened to Twilight Devastation first though, because I know you're all wondering just how bad this is going to be. Honestly, it's not super bad when all is said and done. They could have done a lot worse for sure, but it's a massive nerf for what people were using it for. Twilight Devastation became the single best corruption effect in AoE content after the Echoing Void nerf, so it's only natural that everyone and their donkey who was running Mythic Plus, or even Mythic Raids, wanted to get their hands on at least one Twilight Devastation piece. Dealing 18% of your max health to all enemies in front of you can destroy packs of smaller mobs, and because it scales off your max health, it's also one of the best tanking corruptions for DPS that you can get, and it just gets better as you get better gear. The more stamina you have, the more health you have, and the more damage it deals. Because of this, it is kind of easy to see why it's next on the nerf list. It's just doing so much damage. But I said it was a bit of a weird nerf. That's because they aren't actually changing anything relating to its damage. A rank 1 Twilight Dev will still do 6% of your max health, a rank 2 is still up there at 12% of your max health, and rank 3 also remains unchanged at 18% of your max health. So what exactly did they do here? Well, they nerfed how well Twilight Devastation scales in AoE packs. Previously, if you pulled 100 monsters and Twilight Dev procced, you would hit all 100 monsters providing they were in front of you and actually got hit by your wandering purple beam. People were able to pull entire zones of horrific visions, several packs of mobs in dungeons, and just annihilate any mass AoE encounter in the new raid, mainly Hivemind and Carapace. With the changes in place, your Twilight Devastation can only hit a maximum of 10 enemies. They explained it like this: the first 5 targets that get hit by your proc will take damage as normal, and then for targets 6 through 10 it will deal half damage. After hitting 5 enemies, it will also shrink in size until it completely disappears after hitting 10 total targets. So if you only ever have 5 available targets, this nerf doesn't actually do anything at all to Twilight Devastation. If you have 10 targets, 5 of them will take half damage, which is quite a sizable nerf if you think about it. It's certainly not going to be one-shotting a massive pack of mobs anymore, but the real killer here is the 10 target cap. That puts a hard limit on just how far this corruption effect can scale. No more mass pulls at the end of Temple of Sethralis, no more cleaving every single drone on the Hivemind encounter with one swing, and no more one-shotting an entire area of Horrific Visions monsters. I actually wonder how this nerf will affect tanks in Horrific Visions, because the ones that I know that have been doing very well, you know, the chaps clearing 5 masks all objectives right now, they're actually relying very heavily on Twilight Devastation for their damage, and they're pulling large packs to take advantage of how it works, or I guess how it used to work, so I'll be keeping an eye on them to see if this nerf creates any problems for them, but we'll have to wait and see. The good news is that for up to 5 targets, there's no change really, but for anyone wanting to cause havoc in mass AoE like they used to, it is a massive nerf to Twilight Devastation. With the Echoing Void a distant memory thanks to the nerfs to that corruption, I'm curious to see if another corruption will enter the spotlight after Twilight Devastation has now been nerfed. The only corruption that I can think of right now that still hits any number of monsters with its cleave effect is the Rawdon weapons corruption, but that's only available if you can actually get the Rawdon weapons, so it's very select classes, and it comes from a raid boss, so it's certainly not an easy one to pick up, but that could increase the popularity of rogues and demon hunters who can use that super strong AoE corruption. Speaking of raid bosses, quite a few changes have been made to the Nyalotha raid with this reset as well. Prophet Keturah received the most changes, or at least the most impactful, I would think. The entire encounter has kind of been turned on its head. Instead of the boss entering his annoying transition phase every 20% of his health you knock off, he will now enter it only at 66% and 33% health. That gives us 2 transition phases total, down from 4. This had to be the most annoying boss fight that was also way too easy at the same time because of how often the phases swapped back and forth. We were getting to the point on Mythic where we would skip 3 out of the 4 walls that are supposed to spawn because our DPS was getting higher and higher every single week. If you weren't aware, the massive wall of duplicates that he spawns that one-shots you if you walk into them, that ability is on a timer. If you got the boss's health to the next 20% mark before he cast the wall, you just didn't have to deal with it at all. So the higher your DPS, the less mechanics you had to deal with and the easier the fight became. It was such a bizarre fight, but with these changes you actually fight the boss for longer, only have to deal with 2 transition phases, and you probably won't be able to skip the wall mechanic anymore. So this is actually kind of a buff for the boss. You have to handle more of its mechanics more often, but in exchange it's less tedious to work through. A good change when all is said and done, in my opinion. To compensate for less transition phases, the debuff that is applied during those phases has been doubled from 2% increased shadow damage per stack up to 4%, so you will still have to get through the phase quite quickly. Rawdon is another boss receiving some changes. The Void Collapse ability, that's the one that you have to soak to split damage among your allies. The cast time has been increased to 4.5 seconds on Raid Finder, Normal and Heroic difficulties. That gives you a bit more time to get everyone lined up to make sure you split the damage across enough players so no one gets one shot. The damage of Void Collapse has also been reduced on all difficulties. We're not too sure by how much, but I would think it's a good chunk off the total to make this ability a lot easier to deal with in general. Void Collapse also leaves a healing debuff on the target and that reduces your healing taken by 50%. Previously, I believe the duration on Mythic difficulty was longer than other difficulties, making it a bit harder to deal with, but that's now been reduced down to 6 seconds. Checking the dungeon journal, all of the difficulties now list this debuff as lasting for 6 seconds, so Mythic has just been brought in line with everything else. Combining all of these nerfs, the Rawdon fight on Mythic should be at least a little bit easier to deal with. And then there are also some changes to visions. Visions and visions. There's always something for this system, isn't there? Every single week I swear we talk about changes to coalescing visions, horrific visions, vessels of visions. It's always something. This week the cap on coalescing visions has been completely removed. It's gone. Poof. It makes sense really. When the cap on vessels in your bags was removed, it probably should have happened at the same time, but oh well, now you can save up coalescing visions instead of saving up vessels in your bags. It's the same thing at the end of the day, but keeping your horrific vision runs saved up as coalescing visions doesn't take up bag space, whereas vessels do, and we all know how important it is to keep our bags tidy now, don't we? To continue with that train of thought and remove all forced vessel acquisition, the Black Empire Assault Cache that used to reward 1 vessel of Horrific Visions, plus the new 2,500 Coalescing Visions, has been streamlined a little bit. Instead of giving you a full vessel that takes up a precious bag space, the cache will now reward you with 12,500 Coalescing Visions. No change in the actual reward, you just get to keep your bags a bit tidier and you can trade the Coalescing Visions for vessels at your own leisure. It might seem a bit pointless, but it is nice to keep these kinds of rewards tidy. Now everything rewards just Coalescing Visions, so you only have to look at one place to see how many Horrific Visions you can run. Another change to the Black Empire Assault that's not entirely relevant right now, but it will be next week, is the addition of a portal at the end of the Veil of Eternal Blossoms Black Empire Assault questline. When you delve deep into the underground of Pandaria to take on the Faceless Commander as he tries to corrupt Pandaria's waters, or whatever he's doing locked away under the ground where it takes forever to get to him and then forever to get back out, you all know who I'm talking about. The mages have it easy with their quick portal back up top, but now everyone can experience the same level of convenience because the dev team has finally added a portal that spawns after you kill that mini-boss that ports you right outside of Moshugan Palace. It's a good day to fight against the Black Empire, or I guess it will be whenever the Veil is under attack by the Black Empire again. Next week. We can benefit from this next week. There's one more change that seems to have slipped through the cracks for a lot of players, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't notice. They were a little sneaky about this one, and from what I can tell they haven't posted about it yet either. The legendary Cloak proc that you gain when you hit rank 12 on your lustrous back piece was buffed for seemingly no reason. It used to provide you with 3.3 thousand primary stat when it procced, and that was bumped up to 3.6 thousand primary stat very recently. That's actually a pretty hefty buff to an already incredibly powerful proc on an item that absolutely everyone will get their hands on eventually. Over 3,000 primary stat is massive. That's more than what most trinkets will offer you even at some of the higher item levels, and it's from a source that everyone has access to. Anyone who is running horrific visions will be upgrading their cloak, and everyone can get to rank 12 sooner or later. The rank 12 proc is huge for your DPS, healing or tanking, so you should definitely be aiming to pick that up ASAP. It's also now worth more than it was before with this buff, about 300 primary stat more in fact, so go run some visions and gather up some corrupted cores. Your DPS will thank me later. And that's all the news we have so far this week. I'm definitely not surprised that Twilight Devastation was finally knocked on the nose, but I do find it quite typical that the game waited until this week to give me my first Twilight Dev piece. It's only a rank 1 and I probably won't use it unless I'm tanking, but I guess it's still better than nothing. I'm holding out for that rank 3 though. Even with the nerf, it's going to be amazing for Mythic Plus dungeons. It just still does so much damage, it's so great. I'm also happy that more or less every restriction regarding currencies or items for the horrific visions have now been lifted. They didn't make much sense to me to begin with, so it's nice to see them gone. How do you feel about the Twilight Dev nerfs? What do you think about the changes to Prophet Keturah especially? Does having less phases make it more enjoyable, or do you think it was fine the way it was? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.